Welcome back to artofdino.com, and it's time for an interesting read that I found in an old kind of newspaper periodical called the New England Spectator. And I believe it's kind of a religious anti-slavery text. It seems like it has a lot of Bible things, and it has a lot of different things from around the world, and a lot of anti-slavery kind of aspects in it, and it has a lot to do with different stories from around where I grew up, which is kind of interesting as well. But I found this one story in particular, which I thought had a lot of amazing insight that I personally just found interesting. And again, when I read something and it lingers with me for a few days, I realize that it's important enough to make a video on, because a couple things that I heard in this connect to a lot of different things, like the destruction of the noses and different artifacts, the way that the English took over from the ancients, and all this stuff. And it's from the perspective of a missionary. It says missionary intelligence instead of military intelligence. It says a letter from Reverend Hollis Reed, missionary of the American Board at Ahmednagar in India. And this following letter will be read in much interest, particularly by children, it says. But the children back then were a lot smarter than they are now. And in general, this is something that I feel is of interest to people that have children now, because it shows you just a totally different realm of raising children and whatnot, especially in India at this time. And it has a lot of interesting things just all around, I felt. So history, different things about artifacts, temples, different customs, different cultural aspects, caste kind of developments at this time. It's just another glimpse into the magic of India in the 1800s, which has some slight glimpse of the ancient times. It's still left over. So I wanted to read it to you here, and I'll chime in from time to time and definitely comment, and I want to see what you all think. This is the page that it's on. It's only one page, and it's about 2 columns, so it shouldn't take too long. But very interesting stuff. So I got a lot of pictures from India and different engravings and stuff throughout time to go along with the reading. So I'll put the link below. You can check out more New England Spectator, because you never know. These old periodicals just have stuff stuffed to the brim all over. There's interesting little tidbits of things. So take a listen to this. Here we go. Ahmednagar, October 15th, 1834, to the Sabbath School of the Second Presbyterian Church of Troy. So that might be New York, I think. But here we go. My dear children, I have heard of you all through Mr. Dana, your superintendent, and I am now going to write you. I am very fond of good children, and having heard that most of you are good children, I shall spend an evening in writing to you. Also, very interesting, just the language, everything used, even the language they talk to children. It's not like the way Kamala talks to children. It's normal and educated. So here we go. But again, it's very biased as far as how the Christians view these ancient religions. So that part is always a little interesting because they give off some stuff, but it's also a little insulting when they refer to everyone as heathens that thinks differently from them. But take what you will, and insert your own present-day opinions into this reading, and I think that's where you'll get the most value. Here we go. The Hindus, Hindoos. Some of you have heard who I am, and where I live, and what I am doing, but as you do not all know, I shall tell you. I live in a country called India. Some people call it Hindustan, but Hindustan is only one province in India, some distance to the north of the Deccan, the province in which I live. Once, it is true, the whole country was called Hindustan. The Persians called the country by this name when they conquered it. Hindu means black in their language. Stan means place. The Persians themselves are black, but the Hindus still blacker. Therefore, they called India the place of the blacks. You will see on the globe that the place of my residence is nearly on the opposite side from you, so that when you have day, I have night. The sun shines on me 10 hours before it does on you. It is now 11 o'clock at night with me and 1 o'clock p.m. with you. The sailing distance to Bombay is about 16,000 miles, and by looking on the map east of Bombay, 175 miles, you will see Ahmednagar, where I now am. And it's also very interesting, the place of the blacks, Hindustan. I don't really think of Hindustans and Indians as being black and blacker. So very, very interesting. I don't know what changed at one point in time, but something always does. Their houses. The house which I occupy was once a Mohammedan mosque, Tartarian. That is a temple where the Mohammedans used to pray. These followers of the false prophet were once very numerous and powerful in Ahmednagar. So there you go, you get the stereotypical view from from these guys as everyone is a false prophet, but these religions were existing for thousands of years and didn't have power-hungry people manipulating the text constantly. The text, people were pretty pure, and you'll see. Their kings reigned here for many years, built palaces, gardens, mosques, reservoirs of water called tanks, aqueducts, tombs, and everything which pride and folly taught them. All these were built of the most durable stone and mortar of the most superior kind, so that houses built 500 years ago are just as firm as ever, for there is no wood in any part of them. Now we build with plastic. The tops of the buildings are arched, and the pillars are of stone, as neatly covered as ever you saw wood beams and pillars. There is an enormous palace standing about 3 miles from my house. It stands in the center of an artificial pond of water, and was only approached by boats. The pond, which was formed of beautiful and costly hewn stone, is situated in the center of a garden of 300 or 400 acres, and is fed by an aqueduct which conveys the water from the distance of several miles. It cannot now easily be ascertained from what place the water is brought. The garden was adorned with all sorts of fruit and flower trees, many of which are still standing. This palace is now occupied by the English government as a silk manufactory. After thousands of years, the English government always seems to weasel their way in and begin the process of erasure. The glory of the Mussulman has departed. They were the enemies of God, and therefore he gave them up to be spoiled. It's tough to ever really kind of believe that these people possess some kind of sacred power when they refer to other people who are pretty pure and pretty innocent and whatnot as so evil. It's kind of it makes you really kind of lose respect for these people. But we're in search for information, so here we go. Many of their tombs, aqueducts, and their walls are torn to pieces to build houses for the Europeans, the present governors of the land. Other tombs are occupied as dwellings, mosques for horse stables, their aqueducts water the gardens of their conquerors, and their own beautiful parks and gardens are torn down. How nice. There is one tomb standing on a high hill about 6 miles distant, which is 3 stories high, and each story 30 feet, besides a basement story 15 or 20 feet high, as far as they know, in which are deposited the remains of the builder. This is a work of great magnitude. I'd like to find this. It was left unfinished. How high it would have been carried, it is impossible to say, had the man lived to complete it. His name was Salabat Khan, Salabat Khan. Might have to look him up too. The Mohammedans' story of the rich temple and the god Sumnat. It is now 1,000 years since the Mohammedans invaded India from the north, Tartarians. Their professed object was to destroy idolatry by force and to establish their own religion. They broke down the Hindu temples, and destroyed their gods, and carried off silver, gold, jewels, diamonds, pearls, and all sorts of precious stones in such quantities that they did not pretend to count the value of it, but measured it as we do grain. So by weight. That's pretty ridiculous. They didn't even care. I will give you one example of this. After Mahmud, the first Mohammedan conqueror in India, had subdued nearly all the north of India and plundered a great number of temples, from some of which he had carried off many camels' loads of gold, silver, and precious stones, he marched into Gujarat, a country only about 300 miles north of where I am. He had heard of a very rich temple there, which was dedicated to a very famous god called Sumnat, Sumnat. He had also been told that the Hindus said if the Mohammedans should come near that temple, that Sumnat would instantly destroy them. The brave Mahmud was enraged at this and determined to destroy it, for he had made a vow that he would not stop his ravages till he had rooted the abominations of idolatry out of India. So he marched with a great army into Gujarat. As he approached, the foolish Brahmins at the temple thought to frighten the old Mahmud by telling him that Sumnat was a very terrible god, and that he would instantly destroy his whole army. The Hindus all believed this, and therefore when the army began the attack, instead of fighting, they all ran and threw themselves on their faces before Sumnat. But he could afford them no help, as he was only a stone. The Hindus then, driven to desperation, fought bravely. But Mahmud conquered, and entered the temple, and with his own hands began to break the idol. With the first blow, the very first blow, you can tell his intentions, he struck off his nose, then his ears, then his head. So very symbolic. We see noses broken off in so many different things. This was just a method, whether it was a uniform method that these evil people used throughout the world because they knew that that was the most desecrating thing or whatnot, or they saved the noses for some weird reason. I'm not really sure, but again, here is an account of it. As he was breaking down the once famous god, the Brahmins who had kept the temple, and they were very numerous, some thousands, presented a petition entreating that he would spare the god from further abuse, and they offered him several millions of money if he would not break the image any more. He said the false god was in his power, and he would not sell it for money, as he chose rather to be an image breaker, he said, rather than an image seller. So he struck the idol again, and at this blow opened the belly, for it was hollow, and to his astonishment the cavity of this great idol was full of gold, valuable jewels, diamonds, pearls, and all kinds of precious stones, which were worth more than the money offered by the Brahmins. So did they know all of these things? And how many other statues have been taken with tons of treasures inside them and then broken open like piggy banks? I wonder if that's where they got the piggy bank idea. And I wonder how many elites have these structures, or the Smithsonian or whatnot, that still have things in them or have been destroyed and pillaged of the things inside them because they can x-ray them or God knows what now. But very interesting to see that they would hide things like this, and you know that they would. Any desperate nation and people do whatever it takes to make to preserve their legacy. And so we have a lot of digging and exploring to do. Do you ask how all these precious things came to be deposited there? I will tell you. The Brahmins are a very covetous and a very wicked set of people. They are the priests of the people and pretend to teach them, but in reality care for nothing but money in a great name. Yeah, that's kind of the kettle calling the pot black. They tell the people they must make pilgrimages to certain temples and bring with them rich offerings for the gods, and that they will in this way obtain righteousness. The Brahmins take all these offerings to themselves and hoard them up in the temple. When the people were rich, they used to make very valuable offerings, so that all the most frequented temples of India were formerly very rich. You see how it was that the Mohammedans were able to build such splendid palaces and tombs. They built splendid mosques, which cost more than 5 times as much money as Mr. Tucker's church. The English, too, have bared very largely in the former riches of India, but they do not, like the Mohammedans, try to establish Christianity, their own religion, in the place of Hinduism. Sure. The present Hindus' employments and character. The Hindus do not now, as they once did, build great houses and ride on elephants, camels, and fine horses, and have great trains of servants to attend them. Most of their houses are now built of mud, with a thatched roof. The mud is mixed with straw, then formed into bricks and burnt in the sun. This explains Exodus verse 7. I do not suppose that the Israelites were obliged to gather straw to be used as fuel to burn the bricks, but to be chopped to mix with the mud. The houses of the natives are generally very small and dirty. They have neither floors, chimneys, or windows. There is no occasion for fire except for the purpose of cooking, and then the smoke goes out at the door. The cattle, sheep, dogs, and children all occupy the same room. There are neither beds, chairs, or tables in their houses. They sleep upon a mat on the ground, eat with their fingers, and sit on their heels, or more generally, cross-legged. The people are very indolent. They think all happiness consists in eating, smoking, sleeping, and gratifying their passions. It is thought a great disgrace to work. No one will work with his own hands if he can possibly avoid it. I suppose more than half of the men in Nugar do absolutely nothing but lounge about in the bazaar, the market, make mischief, tell or hear filthy stories, see shows, and devise all manner of evil. Those who pretend to work hard do not in general work only from 10 in the morning till 4 in the afternoon. The women and girls are still more idle. There is nothing in the present state of things which they can do, except to cook a little rice, or make their bread once or twice a day. They have no floors or furniture to clean, no clothes to make, no stockings to knit. They cannot read, nor do they wish to learn. The lower class of women, however, often work hard. They carry burdens as porters, collect cow dung or for fuel, work on the farm, and do all kinds of drudgery, sometimes with a child hung to their back and another one or two by their side or lying on a blanket under a tree near them. And I find it very interesting and impossible to ignore when they talk about how simple these people are, but then they also connect them to the buildings that they make. These architectural buildings are not just like, oh, these people can't build they can't build a tiny house. They only cook. They don't even know how to work. Yet the buildings that they're surrounded by are the most intricately hardworking possible structures to be ever made in the history of time. They're not just putting blocks like Legos together. They're carving out masterpieces of artwork that would take months, years for one or two, hundreds of humans to do. And so, not to mention the colors and the jewels that were extracted at one point. It's just a complete separation from the old reality to the new one. The reset that at some point happened that made people useless, made people be like, what? We're in a world of all these crazy things that are beyond our capabilities by a thousandfold, and we're claiming that we kind of did these, or we know the purpose of these, or we know that they're just garbage and evil or something, and now people can just cook rice. It's like there's so much missing from the story, and it's a shame, but we're going to get there. We will get there. So here we go. It continues. It says, religious beggars. There is another class of people here who are very lazy and very wicked. I must give you some account of them. They are mendicants, that is, religious beggars. There are different grades of them who are called by different names, as Gosamis, Gogis, Gurus, Lungachis, Fakirs, Seekers. The latter are Mussulmen, but differ very little in their habits from the others. These beggars pretend to have renounced the world and to be very holy. They wear no clothes except a strip of old cloth about the middle, besmear their bodies with ashes, mark up their faces, allow their uncut and uncombed hair to hang down on their shoulders, all matted with oil, ashes, and yellow ochre. Some of them carry about with them nothing but a gourd shell to receive alms of rice and grain and a staff. Others have rude instruments of music with which they entertain the people, or monkeys, snakes, and other things to exhibit. Some are storytellers, song singers, jugglers, and so on. The latter do not lay much claim to a holy character, but still they all say they are doing the work of God. These sturdy beggars go from village to village all over the country, and some of them become very rich. They are generally great, stout, healthy men, for they get a much better living than the poor people who work hard. These people something is very meritorious to give to these men, and besides, the common people believe that these men have intercourse with the gods, and that if they do not give them all they ask, or if they offend them, they will do them some great evil. Sometimes they will go to a house where the people refuse to give them anything, as they have nothing to give. The beggars then sit down at the door and use every means to induce the family to contribute something, not believing what the family say. If they do not succeed in this way, they will threaten to curse the poor people of the house. This frightens them dreadfully, and they will then give them something, if it be only a mouthful of bread in the house. There are still a great many of these wicked beggars now, who under pretense of being very religious, deceive the people and secretly live in all kind of wickedness. But their number is small now, in this part of India, to what it once was. Formerly they would go through the country in companies of 10 or 12,000. When they came to a village, they would order the people to feed them and give them whatever they wanted. In this way they oppressed the poor people without measure, for there was no resisting their claims. Sometimes they laid a whole village desolate. That's very interesting. I'm kind of curious as to who's got the right opinion on that one. And, is there something that this guy was missing? But also, that's a pretty, that kind of makes sense in some way that would be a problem if 10 to 20, 12,000 people were roaming around that demanded to be fed or be smited by God. So here we go. The children, I shall now close by giving you a short account of the children of the Hindus, and after reading it you will thank God that you were not born heathen. And you will, I hope, be very thankful to your parents for all the good instruction which they have given you, and to your teachers for all the good things which they have taught you. For the heathen have no infant schools, no Sabbath schools, no Christian fathers and mothers, and no good books except what the missionaries have given them. So they have no forced indoctrination from pretty much age 3, which is, could go either way. Nor are they fond of reading good books. They like nothing but very silly books. When these children are small, they are very pretty. I think them handsome. But as they grow up to be 12 or 15 years old, they become ugly in their appearance and very wicked and shameful in their manners. This is a blanket statement of all of these people that this guy saw, apparently. They are then more black and filthy looking. The little girls and boys which I daily see running about the streets are a beautiful lively brown color and appear very playful and pretty. They generally go naked till they are about 8 years old. After that, they wear little clothing. All the people of this country are very fond of going naked, except about the middle. Though they have less regard to clothing, they are all very fond of jewels. It's just interesting, too, that, in this country at this time, everyone was naked with a cloth. But if you look at all the pictures from the 1800s of America and Europe, everyone is finely dressed in suits and hats and all that stuff. So it's just so interesting, the clashes of what has happened, and some bit of information that we're all missing that bridges it all together and makes sense of it. It's got something to do with resets. The little girls wear ornaments in their ears, around their ankles and wrists, and on their toes. And what would amuse you more is they wear rings in their noses. Most of the little girls do not comb their hair. This gives them a very bad appearance. But they are very indolent and like to wallow about in the dirt and play and quarrel, but do not care about appearing neat and clean. When they do comb their beautiful shining black hair and roll it up on their necks with a wreath of flowers, they appear very pretty. But what is worse, these children are all very wicked. They lie, steal, quarrel, use all sorts of bad language, disobey their fathers, abuse their mothers, call them all kinds of bad names, and often strike them. Girls sold to wicked women. Yikes. The Hindus prize their boys very much, but they do not think much of their girls. In time of famine, the poor people not unfrequently sell their girls. Not many months ago, there was a whole cartload brought to Nagur to be sold. We did not like to buy them, because that would appear like encouraging slavery. Mrs. Reed offered to take them and feed, clothe, and take care of them, and make them industrious good girls, but nobody cared for this. Their parents chose rather to sell them to bad women than to us. It is a very sad thing that the little girls of India cannot be taught to read and work. It is almost impossible to do anything with them while they live with their wicked parents. If we could get them to come and live with us, we might make very fine girls of them. But they are afraid they shall be polluted. That is, they all regard caste, and if they were to eat our food or eat food cooked by a person of another caste, they would, as they say, be polluted. We have offered to take as many children as will come to us, and give them a cook of their own caste, but still they are afraid and will not come, nor will they go to school a day unless we pay them for it. All this, you will say, is very sad, but you must not forget how many precious promises there are in the Bible that the heathen shall be converted, and you must pray continually that God would fulfill these promises. And this is the last section. It says, little children taught to worship idols. I have already written you too long a letter, but I must say another word about these heathen children. Besides all the other bad things which they are taught, when very young they are taught to worship idols. And this is interesting because China just actually made adults and parents sign a sign a form that required them to not teach their children superstitious worship of idols or any religion at kindergarten. So pretty interesting, the combination of things now and hundreds of years ago, and God knows for how long. Here we go. Not to worship idols. Every family have little gods in their houses which they always worship. And besides, there are images of different kinds in every corner and street, on every hill, and under every green tree. I have often seen a father come to a temple where I have been sitting, and bring a little boy who just began to speak, and teach him to join his hands and bow to the stone god and repeat his name. There is a temple near where I am now writing, at which I always see a company of girls running around the temple. This is one mode of worship. Walking around an object is an act of reverence for it. Poor creatures, I have seen them walking around a temple or a sacred tree for 4 or 5 hours at one time. I entreat these poor foolish creatures to forsake such follies, but they will not listen to me. So we must all pray very much that God would give them new hearts, then they will listen. Believe me, my dear children, yours truly, H. Reed. So very interesting, and even in that last paragraph is almost one of the most interesting parts about how these people from the Christian religion and whatnot are so narrow-minded that they just can't fathom this. Like, they see people in like Mecca going around in a particular circle, this ancient method that's been used for so many times, for countless eons, that they do this. And they even know, the Christian knows that it's in reverence of, so they know the purpose of it. But these kids that are doing this, and adults and whatnot, are benefiting from it in ways, benefiting from this process in ways that these people can't even fathom. They can't even fathom it to the point where they think of it as pure evil, heathen, the devil's work, all this stuff. Yet they're trying very hard, standing around it, watching kids happily do it for hours. Kids doing something like this for hours. Think about your kids and having them walk around something for hours. There's clearly a benefit that these children and adults were getting from this power, from this process. Some ancient thing ingrained into their DNA, ingrained into their belief system, ingrained into their reality, full blown, that couldn't be seen by these people at all. It can't even be seen like slightly like, oh, that is kind of cool, or oh, I see the tranquility aspect or the meditative aspect of that. Nope, they see it as pure evil. And whether they're really seeing it as that, it seems like it because he seems to be trying to convert them, or if he's just bringing that information back to make the people think that is up for debate, I guess. But either way, it's nuts. The difference of realities is so outstanding. It's almost like these ancient ones were, they were left over from a reset, and they were just kind of, some devastation occurred at some point, which separated the people that built those old buildings and moss and tanks and water reservoirs and temples from the people that are there at this time in the 1800s. Something happened at one point for how many hundreds of years, I don't know. But it's just an unbelievable difference. It's almost like a totally different species of human between these Christians and the other kind of more ancient ones of India. And so, how do we reconcile this? How do we discover what the real, what happened, the true history of our Earth that led to all these drastic changes and differences, and even similarities in certain spots? But who knows? The cycles keep going, and we are just bouncing around in it. So I hope you enjoyed this. A lot of different insight into a lot of cool areas. So I hope you all take a look at more. I'm going to be digging through this Spectator some more and seeing what else I can find. But just had to share this one because I thought it was interesting. Hope you all thought it was as well. Bless you all. Have a great day.